Hey guys, welcome to the How the Frack We Got Here podcast. We're actually going to be starting in a very about the next 5 minutes or so just bear with me just for a few moments. All right, and I think we are good to go. So let's go ahead and go into this. Today's date, February 23rd, 2019, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host and most, Will Buchanan, on How the Frack We Got Here. We do try to take the current weeks of events and honestly try to make sense of it all. And man, has it been a week. And I do mean a week. There is no way around it. There is no way otherwise to say it, but it has actually been a lot of news. But before we get into that, we do have to sit there and say that this is an adult podcast, which of adult nature, language, content, and some things may show things of graphic nature. So viewer discretion is definitely advised. As you can tell, me being tongue-tied this morning is usually a problem, but you know what? We're gonna roll it on through it. So, with that being said, guys, like I said, this whole entire week has been, well, it's just been a massive news across the board. But the first place we need to go into is, like I always say, Baby Orange, because Baby Orange always seems to think that, he's above everything. He can just go ahead and do what he wants to. He wants to be that dictator so bad that it's almost, it's beyond obvious. Now, if you do remember from last week, he did actually sign a bill that prevented a secondary government shutdown, but he also wanted to go ahead and invoke a national emergency, which would have enabled him the ability to release funds from certain other projects to fund his wall. But thankfully, as it looks like we hoped what would happen, is that not only would there be protests about it, there would actually be this.
President Trump in Florida today, where backlash over his decision to declare a national emergency has followed him.
Immigrants are welcome here, no.
The president and his allies are gearing up for a fight after he granted himself the authority to use billions from the military construction budget to bypass Congress and fund his wall, a move that's expected to face multiple legal challenges.
We should be filing sometime today. It's kind of awkward to say that on President's Day we're going to be suing the President of the United States, but sometimes that's what you have to do.
After critics seized on this remark from the president as proof it's not a real emergency,
I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster.
His aides insisted it is.
What the president was saying is that like past presidents, he could choose to ignore this crisis, choose to ignore this emergency as others have, but that's not what he's going to do.
But the White House isn't just facing legal challenges. Democrats are preparing a joint resolution to repeal the national emergency and hoping skeptical Republicans will join on.
Now, whether we have enough for an override and veto, that's a different story. But frankly, I think there's enough people in the Senate who are concerned that what he's doing is robbing from the military and the DOD to go build this wall.
Despite those threats, the president's chief immigration advisor said he won't back down.
Yes, he will veto.
He's going to protect his national emergency declaration, guaranteed.
Republicans have been split over the emergency, with many worried about the precedent it could set, while others are making clear they fully back Trump, even if the diversion of funds means jeopardizing projects such as the construction of a middle school in Kentucky.
I would say it's better for the middle school kids in Kentucky to have a secure border. We'll get them the school they need. But right now, we got a national emergency on our hands.
The emergency declaration triggering protest across the nation this President's Day.
So what's interesting about that is that for the simple fact of the matter, there are multiple things from that. Number one, you do love the fact that Democrats are finally going to be able to sit there and say, hell no, you're not going to get your wall. Now, for all those that don't know how the national emergency process works, very simple. There's actually about 127 different conditions to where the National Emergency Act can be investigated by the president. Now, he just can't sit there and say, I declare a national emergency, open up these funds, and, go from there. It has to be ratified by the House of Representatives and Senate before it can go through. That's why Senator Tammy Duckworth was saying, well, We know we have the votes as far as the House of Representatives, but in the Senate, we might not. Because it basically takes both houses to basically say yes or no. He just can't bypass everything like he thinks he can. But what I love about the fact of the matter is that they're still calling it a national emergency. There is nothing to suggest there is no such thing as a national emergency at the border, except for the one they're trying to create. Think of it like they're trying to create their own Watergate, pretty much. You want to be investigated, but you really don't need to be investigated. But if you throw enough smoke at that, you'll think that people are going to believe you because you keep on pointing in that direction, and keep saying, well, there's the boy who cried wolf, and there's no wolves at the door. So it's interesting where Trump and so many people are saying, well, there's a crisis at the border, we need this wall. No, you really don't. There's no need for this wall. There's no need for any of it. You just want to build a wall because you basically want to fulfill your nationalist tendencies. You might as well just be honest about that. But Trump not only stops there. Oh no, he makes a lot more news, especially this one, which I happen to find on Facebook.
Democrats are also pushing extreme late-term abortion. Allowing children to be ripped from their mother's womb right up until the moment of birth. What's that all about? So in Virginia, the governor stated that he would even allow a newborn baby to come out into the world and wrap the baby and make the baby comfortable and then talk to the mother and talk to the father and then execute the baby. Execute the baby. Beautiful babies are counting on us to protect them, and we will.
Yep, that's the bullshit. But, what do we expect? It's Trump. We shouldn't expect this anymore because, Trump's being fed these lies because he's a con man. A con man doesn't leave his people, a con man doesn't leave his mark pissed off. He leaves his mark happy because con men very rarely get negative responses, don't really get ahead in life, they get negative response from people. So the whole thing about that law they were talking about was really just false. I mean, they rolled back the law to where if it required 3 doctors. It required 3 doctors, and it required that the mother's health be the mother's mental or physical health be in jeopardy in order to do the abortion in the 3rd trimester. Now, that was just particularly one. And before I get into this, before people start wondering, I'm going to go ahead and say it. For me, I've always said it best about abortion, and I'm always pro-choice. It's always going to be whatever a woman does with her body is her business, her choice. There should not be any law in the books that tells a woman what she can and cannot do. In the same sense, like if you're going to stand and tell a woman what she can and can't do with her body, you should also be able to go to a guy and say, hey, you can't do this either. And then it'll be amazing how quickly you sit there and say, we always want to be equal. We always want to be equal, but when it comes down to it, if you put a guy under the same regulations that you put a woman, there will be riots on every street corner. But again, that just shows you I used to say stupid. I used to say ignorant. I used to say so many things, but when it really comes down to it, I think people are so misguided, really by their own moral compass, if you will. Because if you really think about it, when it comes down to a woman and her body, it is her body. You know, I don't care if you got her pregnant, it's still her body. If she chooses to do whatever she wants to do with it, I am not going to lose any sleep at night because she has to live with the consequences, as it should be. But it's just something about, there's something about abortion that just, honestly, it's kind of obsessive with some people. Almost to the point to where you see dumb stuff like this.
A growing number of states are beginning to pass laws that would immediately ban abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. According to new reporting from CBS News digital reporter Kate Smith, 5 states currently have so-called trigger laws banning abortion on the books, and 4 more states have proposed the legislation to do so. And Kate joins me now to discuss this. Kate, thanks so much for being with us. First off, why are these called trigger laws?
That's a great question. They're called trigger laws because they're effectively useless right now. So Arkansas just passed this bill. It's in effect. Excuse me, it's not in effect. Right. That's the whole point, right? It can't do anything except for just sit in text. The whole thing, all of these laws get triggered if and only if Roe v. Wade becomes overturned.
Can it be challenged then?
They can't actually, because they don't do anything. Right. You can't challenge a law that's not in effect because there's nobody that would have been impacted by these laws.
Right. So how many states and which states have passed?
Sure. So we have 5 states so far. We have Arkansas most recently. We have North and South Dakota, Louisiana, and Mississippi.
And these are on the books.
They're on the books.
Wow. And what are the factors that are giving lawmakers the confidence to propose and pass these laws?
It's all one thing. It's all the Supreme Court and how it's made up. For the first time since 1973, these politicians actually feel like there is a chance that Roe v. Wade might become overturned. And if not completely overturned, significantly chipped away at. And when in the story, we speak to one person who says, in an ideal world, Roe v. Wade becomes virtually ineffective.
Right. So these are states that are hoping to ban abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. Are there other states that are setting up legislation to protect it?
Absolutely. You're seeing states do the exact opposite of what those states that we were just talking about are doing. Here in New York, we saw them expand abortion access. So not only are they trying to maintain it, they were expanding what women had access to. Virginia and Vermont are also proposing similar laws that both expand and maintain what women have access to in regards to reproductive health.
And is this likely to play big in the 2020 election, do you think?
History would say yes.
Would suggest as much, right?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Kate Smith, thank you so much for coming to see us with your...
So, in that sense, the trigger laws they talked about. Now, the trigger laws for a lot of these states, unfortunately my state of Tennessee as well, is that it's almost like they're expecting it to happen. Now, for all those that know, Roe versus Wade is basically the case that makes abortion legal in the U.S. Now, they're talking about the Supreme Court because if you guys don't remember last year with Kavanaugh coming on, Kavanaugh actually had very strong feelings against abortion, and he thought that Roe versus Wade should be overturned. But since he's now confirmed the Supreme Court has an overly majorative conservative base. So, with that being said, as most things try to do with conservatives, they love to control women. So it's not too far out to believe that yes, it is possible that they may actually go back and overturn a decision, because as a Supreme Court, they can do so. They can go back and overturn decisions, which is very, very scary. What's even more scary is that you have all these states passing legislation against women, and it's almost like, well, we're just going to have this in here just in case it pops up. So you're telling me all the other things that you honestly could be passing laws and stuff about, you choose to actually, for the life of me, decide to put this on the books? And what amazes me so is how quickly it got put on the books with pretty much nobody batting an eye. But that pretty much tells you exactly what kind of state you're living in at that point. Because I've always said, the one thing I've said about Tennessee is that's progressively backwards. Because no matter how far they keep on saying we're ahead of the times and all this stuff, it almost feels like we never left the 30s. But moving right along, so we all know, like I said, again, a lot of news has happened mostly surrounding Trump, but it's honestly about a lot about the Robert Mueller investigation, where it's interesting what they've done so far. Where there was a story about William Barr, the new Attorney General, who was supposedly being grilled to make sure that, we actually, he wants to say, he didn't actually say that he'll release to the public, but it needs to be done. And the reason why is because Kenneth Starr's report about Bill Clinton was released. Keep in mind, they tried to impeach Clinton for a blowjob. Not the fact that he was obstructing of justice, not the fact that he was abusing his place of power, not the fact that he was trying to make things easier for his corporate buddies, which he didn't, except, the corporate prisons, the private prisons of America that benefited from his completely overhauled criminal bill that put a lot of people behind bars that didn't need to be. But aside from that, he was only put under impeachment processes for getting head in the White House. So you telling me that we can get a Democratic president under impeachment for getting head, but you can't just, pick from the one of 100 things that Trump has done that are all impeachable offenses? The first one being that he fired the head of the FBI because the head of the FBI would not stop the Mueller investigation. Again, obstruction of justice. But anyway, Democrats at this point are now pretty much saying that William Barr needs to do this.
Attorney General Bill Barr is preparing for a giant early test. Sources telling CNN Barr is making preparations to receive a report from Special Counsel Robert Mueller as early as next week. That would be a crossroads moment for the country, both legally and politically. A little Special Counsel 101 here. Mueller is required to provide the Attorney General with, quote, closing documentation. That means Mueller submits a confidential report to the Attorney General, explaining the cases he investigated and why he decided not to pursue others. Then, it's the Attorney General's turn. Barr will notify the House and the Senate Judiciary Committees about Mueller's conclusions, and then he has some discretion about what to include. He can also determine if publicly releasing the report, or parts of it, is in the public interest. Among the factors the Attorney General will consider: grand jury secrecy rules, the desire to protect classified sources and methods, and the reputations of people interviewed and perhaps investigated, but not charged. How much you get to know and see was a hot topic at his confirmation hearing.
I also believe it is very important that the public and Congress be informed of the results of the special counsel's work. I'm in favor of as much transparency as there can be, consistent with the rules and the law. It's really important to, let the chips fall where they may and get the information out. My goal and intent is to get as much information out as I can, consistent with the regulation.
It's the consistent with the rules and the law, consistent with the regulations. He sounded like he wanted to be transparent, but if you're skeptical of that, you can also say, oh no, he's going to hide behind the rules and the regulations. What do we know about his mindset? Is he for as much as I can, or for as less as I can, or at least I can?
Well, look, I think in the conversations I've heard about going on in the Justice Department, and one of the things I think he is very mindful of is the idea that probably someday all of this report might come out. We don't know whether there's the Democrats and people in Congress might file a lawsuit, whether a court will side with them, but he has to sort of make the assumption that it's going to come out. So he's mindful of that because he's going to get massacred if he's trying to see if he's seen as hiding something.
So we'll leave it from there as far as that goes. So pretty much, William Barr is pretty much saying that he'll let as much as he can go, but in accordance. And I said, you know what? That's the thing that kind of bugs me. The fact he sat there and said that I will release as much information as humanly possible within the guidelines that I go by. I don't understand that. It's almost like, first and foremost, we paid for the investigation. The investigation is taxpayer funded. So in my mind, if we paid for it, we should get access to it. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But he's dancing so much that I'm just like, he's not going to do it. Anybody that dances that much around an answer, 9 times out of 10 is not going to go ahead and just say, well, you know what, I'm just going to release it. He gives it to me, I'm releasing it. No problem. That's how it should be. But he won't. I mean, I'm not going to say, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say that he won't, but the notion that he is giving off says otherwise. It almost says like, well, I don't know. It depends what's on there. instead of being like Kenneth Starr. Kenneth Starr released to the public. We all knew at that point what it was about. But in this case, you hear him say that, and it is almost to the point to where you just want to go, are you freaking kidding me? It's literally, it's almost like you want to say, you freaking kidding me. It really is. But I do hope William Barr does, William, we get the same name, dude. I hope you do the right thing and just release the report in its entirety, because at this point, it needs to be done. If an independent reporter can come in and interview a president, in his case about a blowjob, you simply, sir, can come in and sit there and say, did Mueller find collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia? Because at this point, he's gotten a lot of people under this investigation. And that alone tells me that as long as you follow the money, eventually it does lead to Agent Orange. And like I said, aside from his numerical offenses that he should be impeached under, there are plenty out there. But it just depends, because you still have some Republicans that are bending the knee. But aside from that, there was also a few other things that I wanted to sit there and bring up. One being about voter fraud. Now, voter fraud was brought up a lot during the last election, but it was always disregarded as, it can't happen. There was like a point, it's like what the, I can't remember what the Republicans actually tried. The bullshit the Republicans tried to pull was like a 0.003 chance or something like that. Funny they should mention that, because in an actual district to where they won, this happened.
Carolina's 9th congressional district, Republican Mark Harris says he pulled out of the race despite a controversial win in November. Harris's victory was never certified due to the allegations of election fraud. The state's Board of Elections has been holding a hearing on the matter for the last several days. And joining me now from Raleigh, North Carolina, CBS News correspondent David Begnaud. David, you had a front row seat to this today. How did this unfold?
We'll talk about a dramatic decision. What happened was they had taken a break. The candidate, Mark Harris, had gone into a side room. They had actually taken a lunch break, and so we had just come back in. And I actually asked one of the public information officers, I said, how long does this go on? How long do you guys have until you figure out if you're going to declare another election or go ahead and certify the one that was? And he said, just go in the room. You're going to want to hear what's about to happen. So we sat down in the very last row, and Mr. Harris, a Southern Baptist preacher who's run before and lost and won this time, got up to the stand, and he turned and he looked at the Board of Elections members, and he basically said, and this is not a verbatim, I'm paraphrasing, he said, I made some statements this morning that were misstatements. I had 2 strokes recently. I'm under medical care. I'm not up to my best, if you will, and because of all of that, I think you should have a new election. And there were gasps in the room, at which point the pastor stood up and walked out the room, and he walked to the back, and then he left with his wife, and I sort of yelled over the banister. I said, Mr. Harris, are you going to run for re-election or for election? You're asking for a new election. Are you going to run again? And he didn't answer. And then his wife looked up at me and she said, I think he'll wait to figure that out. Now, this is a case that is the very last congressional race in the United States to be seated, right? Everybody else is going to Washington, D.C. and is in their spot. This is the last remaining one because of allegations of ballot fraud. Let me see if I can give it to you in the simplest terms. There's a man named McCrae Dallas who was hired to get out the vote. Mr. Dallas is accused of wrongdoing, basically using workers to forge signatures and collect ballots, which you can't even do in North Carolina. Mr. Dallas worked for the Mark Harris campaign. The allegations were Mr. Harris must have known that something was going on. The candidate says, I had no idea. Never had any idea. I believed Mr. Dallas when he said what he was doing was right. I believed him. But here was the twist. The candidate's son, who just so happens to be an attorney, presented emails that said, hey, listen, I told my dad, I thought this guy was kind of shady. I alerted him to a lot of things that were a red flag for me. That's some of the testimony that we've heard over the last couple of days. And then what ended up happening today, the candidate, Mark Harris, was asked on the stand, your son told you multiple times that there seemed to be something fishy. Why didn't you listen to him? And at one point he said, well, he's 27 years old. He's got a dose of arrogance to him, but I should have. And then they took a lunch break. And it was a shocker when he came back and said, okay, I'm not in the best shape medically, so you need to have a new election.
Not only we're looking at a political drama, a family drama unfolding before our eyes as well.
Absolutely.
What does this mean for the Democrat in this? Going forward, what are we looking at here?
Well, look, here's the thing. We don't even know if Harris is going to run again, right? So he won by just over 900 votes. So the Libertarian candidate who actually ran has been in the room. He's been watching the whole thing. So he's gleeful. He's walking around here with a big smile like, I get to do it again. The Democrat will obviously, presumably run again. The question becomes, will Mr. Harris? He has these medical issues. In fact, yesterday we were told he was having to go for IV antibiotics and treatment last night, so they were asking if they could start the hearing this morning a little later so he and his wife could get back here. This throws a lot into flux. This is a coveted district, Mola, where you have the Republicans working really hard
to fight for breaking news. I'm sorry, going into those very dramatic details.
So pretty much out of the entire thing, which was a story that did come out about Mark Harris, and I couldn't find the link where it said literally because of the voter fraud going on that his son had turned around and told him, multiple times not to trust this cat. And of course, like most fathers do when they hear their children, it'd be fine. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't fine. He was found of voter fraud, and he was brought up on charges, which makes the whole entire election there in North Carolina's 9th District pretty much in fault. The fact of the matter is that he tried to blame anything else. So, it's my health. I've had strokes. I'm on medication. Funny how your strokes and medication didn't bother you when you won. Just saying. Just thought it was interesting. But this goes to show you that yes, voter fraud does definitely exist, and usually the side that's crying about it is usually the side that's doing it. Almost the same thing with Stacey Abrams in Georgia. Like, I'm almost more than certain there has been voter suppression, voter fraud, things of that nature in that state, but she can't get other people to get on board with that. Now, I think that eventually that she'll wind up being the governor of Georgia? Yes. But I think at this point, in my mind, it's just like the New England Patriots. You're going to have an asterisk right next to the guy who won. But that story right there just pretty much says that anytime you think it's voter suppression or voter fraud doesn't exist, take a look at that, because it definitely does exist. But moving right along though, guys, like I said, I did talk about as far as Trump, about the Mueller report that they say may wrap up. It was supposed to wrap up next week, but turns out that's not going to happen. In the event that the Mueller report doesn't really get, because right now he's supposed to be going up. As of Friday, he was actually giving his last statements about Paul Manafort, because Paul Manafort was supposed to be testifying before Congress before he gets sentenced, and Mueller was supposed to give his thoughts about how long should Manafort serve his time for. But what's interesting about this is just that there is still a chance that Agent Orange could actually pardon Manafort. Yes, he still could do it. In the event that it does happen, basically Manhattan had other ideas.
District Attorney's Office is preparing state criminal charges against Paul J. Manafort, President Trump's former campaign chairman, in an effort to ensure he will still face prison time even if the president pardons him for his federal crimes, according to several people with knowledge of the matter. Now, we have zero indication the president is preparing that. It has long been one of the things that Mueller's prosecutors were thinking about why was Manafort lying, was that he had some secret deal maybe. But we don't know that, but this is what you might call a backup plan.
It is a backup plan, and the Manhattan DA's office has been at this for well over probably 2 years, for quite some time now, since Robert Mueller got involved, even before. But they were waiting. They were always waiting. They didn't want to in any way conflict with what Robert Mueller's been doing. And now that that is coming to an end, they may see some opportunity here. But they've been ready to file charges. They've been ready to have grand jury file charges, essentially, and move on with that case. And it is a backup plan. There's always this concern that the president would pardon Manafort, but he can't pardon him on this case. There are other jurisdictions that have also been looking at Paul Manafort and bringing charges against him. So it's all a backup plan.
So pretty much as they say, it is a backup plan. It is a backup plan because everybody believes that at first when this whole thing about Trump and impeachment being brought up, they thought that, okay, Trump's just going to turn around and basically pardon all of his friends. So here's how it works. So the president can pardon anybody that's under a charge. However, it doesn't apply to state. So that's the reason why Manhattan and the Manhattan district is actually preparing to file charges, pretty much saying, okay, Trump got you past Mueller, he can't get you past us, which is where the presidential pardon actually, it doesn't actually be effective. Almost in the same sense to where if Trump is ever impeached or brought up on charges, and let's just say he skates past those, New York could actually come back, New York State attorneys could come back and say, wait a minute, we're still going to bring you up on charges. Your pardon doesn't cover this. So that's the reason why they're doing it, and I think it's brilliant that they're doing it, because the simple fact of the matter, it takes away from the fact that you're not going to get away with it. I mean, yeah, you should face the grounds of what you're charged for, but Trump won't be able to get you out of it, which is great. But again, if Trump did pardon him, then again, that kind of signals a little bit of obstruction of justice to, throw on the bonfire of the many other reasons that we can get him for. But also another story, which here's the thing. Before I get to the next story, let me say this. I apologize, guys. I don't know why my mouth is watering like I just thought of food. But anyway, so I understand, before anybody wonders, why are you not talking about Jesse Smollett, or why are you not talking about Robert Kraft, or you're not talking about R. Kelly? Number one, those three stories are distractions. I can care less about a guy who allegedly staged his own attack. I can care less about a guy who's had a history of alleged sexual abuse, especially on minors. I can care less about an NFL owner that got caught in a massage parlor. I could. Because to me, that's not news. To me, that's distractions. So, I mean, that's things we won't cover. Just the simple fact of the matter is just that they're distractions when this story has yet to be actually said a lot over the news, and I'm talking about this one.
Documents providing chilling details about a Coast Guard lieutenant who prosecutors say hoped to murder innocent civilians on a scale rarely seen in this country before being arrested in Maryland last week. 49-year-old Christopher Hassan is facing federal charges of illegal possession of a firearm and possession of a controlled substance. But prosecutors say these charges are just the tip of the iceberg, writing, "The defendant is a domestic terrorist bent on committing acts dangerous to human life that are intended to affect government conduct." Investigators say they found this hit list on Hassan's computer, containing names of prominent Democrats, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as well as a number of 2020 Democratic candidates, including Senators Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Kirsten Gillibrand. The list also containing the names of several journalists from CNN and MSNBC. Federal agents say they found 15 firearms and more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition in Hassan's Maryland apartment, in addition to a stockpile of steroids the government says Hassan was using to increase his ability to conduct attacks. In emails outlined in court filings, Hassan calls himself a white nationalist and was inspired by a manifesto written by Anders Breivik, a Norwegian terrorist convicted of killing 77 people in 2011. Prosecutors say roughly a month before his arrest, Hassan Googled topics including, "Are Supreme Court justices protected?" "Where do most senators live in D.C.?" and "Civil war if Trump impeached."
Yeah, kind of fucked up, isn't it? And you know what else is fucked up? That the word terrorist is nowhere associated with it. Literally, it's a Coast Guard. I mean, he was a Coast Guard officer, which means he was combat trained, which means he's actually had access to more weapons than the common civilian does. And this dude literally had, as they said, more than a stockpile of weapons, a shitload of ammo, and he had a list. I don't know about you, that screams terrorism in my mind. But again, I thought all the bad dudes were on the other side of the border that we got to build a wall on. And this is the thing that, and this is probably going to make me lose some, we didn't be saying this, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It's amazing how quickly we'll label a terrorist that's dark-skinned. But when it comes to the good old Caucasian male, he's confused, he's troubled, he needs help, he's mental, shit like that. But he's never a terrorist in our country. I never understood that. It's like, what is it? I mean, if little old me had way too many guns. If I had a small armory and I had 1,000 rounds of ammunition, if I even had one list with one name on it, I would be automatic terrorist. No problem. They would label me that quick as shit. But you have a Coast Guard officer who literally calls himself a white nationalist. For all those who don't know, that's just a new word for skinhead. And he basically has a list of senators, CNN journalists, mostly Democratic people. And he was about to go on a killing spree. But they will never call him what he is. He is a homegrown domestic terrorist. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Now, it's amazing that they always want to put up this wall to prevent this kind of stuff from happening, but they don't want to admit that this is just one of like 7 stories that we've had in like the last 3 months where you've had homegrown guys just literally turn around and pull terrorist actions. But then again, why we shouldn't be surprised, because we have a white nationalist in the White House who has yet to turn around and tell us, yet to denounce nationalism, white nationalists, yet to denounce skinheads, yet to denounce Nazis. I mean, he doesn't want to denounce them because they're his biggest fan base. Really shouldn't be surprised about that, but it's scary that that story really doesn't get a lot of play as it should. It really shouldn't. Another story that doesn't get enough play as it should is the Jeffrey Epstein case. Now, for anybody that doesn't remember Jeffrey Epstein, basically he is a billionaire who allegedly had parties to where he brought in underage women to basically have sex with old guys. I forgot, it's like Wild Island parties. They allegedly they were called. But anyway, you guys remember that when you heard this, you're like, oh shit, he's going to jail now. Nope. He basically pled. He basically settled and got a non-prosecution agreement. But that actually might be hopefully changing based on this story here.
Joining me now is Miami Herald senior investigative reporter Julie Brown. Her 5-part story, Perversion of Justice, dug deep into how Jeffrey Epstein got the deal of a lifetime. Hi, Julie. So great to have you with us. Julie, what was the reaction from the victims you spoke to about this settlement?
I think a lot of the victims felt relieved that this part was over, but they still do have another civil case in front of them that they have to testify for. So at least this is like one step in the right direction for them.
So, as you said, the opportunity to testify could come in a separate civil case in federal court. Now, if that opportunity comes, what new information will you be looking for to potentially come out of the testimony there?
I think it's just going to be powerful to have all these women in one room. I don't know how many will actually show up, but it would probably be similar to the Larry Nassar case, where you have a number of women that are really telling their stories, and not only the stories about what happened with Epstein, but the stories about how they felt betrayed by the criminal justice system, and how they felt that Epstein had further traumatized them by intimidating them not to go forward with some of these cases.
And Julie, as a result of your reporting, congressional Democrats are now calling for an investigation into Labor Secretary Alex Acosta's role in all of this. Epstein could have faced life in prison, but only ended up with 13 months behind bars. Do we know why he got such a favorable deal?
Well, he was very politically connected. Some of his closest friends were world leaders, ex-presidents, royalty, actors, actresses, people in philanthropy and business. He used those connections as well as his financial means to hire some of the best attorneys in the country, Alan Dershowitz, Kenneth Starr, Roy Black among them, and they put all the pressure to bear on prosecutors, first the state prosecutor and then the federal prosecutor, Alex Acosta, who is now the Secretary of Labor, to make to just make this case really go away. They felt that this was something they needed to keep out of the media. They wanted to keep it away from his victims, exactly what they were doing, because they feared that had the victims found out, then they would have objected publicly, and then the whole deal could have fallen through.
So in your view, was then federal prosecutor Alex Acosta intimidated by Epstein's all-star legal team?
Well, the word that he used back in 2011 when he was first questioned about this was, he said that it was an assault by this all-star legal team, and it had been mentioned that he was basically out-lawyered. It's not clear exactly why he gave in so easily, so to speak. It seems that he had a lot of connections to Starr and other attorneys, because they had been in the same law firm together.
And has he personally responded since your article has come out? Have you reached out to him for a comment?
No, he has. A lot of media obviously have reached out to him, and he hasn't had any comment.
All right. So, Julie, you also spoke to a woman who claimed in an affidavit that Epstein instructed her to have sex with Prince Andrew. What did she say happened?
Well, she had been recruited by Epstein's girlfriend or friend at the time, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is the daughter of the late publishing magnate Robert Maxwell. Maxwell was pretty involved in helping him find masseuses. I mean, she would go to the spas, according to court testimony and deposition. She would go to spas all around Palm Beach, and she would give her business card and try to recruit young women and girls to give Epstein massages. This particular girl, Virginia Roberts, was recruited at Mar-a-Lago, President Trump's resort, and she was told that they wanted to hire a masseuse, and this was sort of the method of operation that they used. These girls came from disadvantaged families, and they promised them $200 just for giving this wealthy playboy a massage. And essentially what happened is, when these girls would go there, these turned into sessions that were not massages at all, but they were sexual trysts, and he groomed these girls, trying to convince them that he would make their lives better.
And this one particular girl stated to you that this happened with Prince Andrew.
Yes, she claims that she was brought to England and she was introduced, and there is a photograph of her with him and with Epstein's companion, Ghislaine Maxwell, and she claims that she was directed to have sex with him, that she was paid a good amount of money, and this happened about 3 times, I think, with him.
All right, Julie, what do we still not know about this story that you want to find out?
Well, I think everybody really wants to know the big why. I think I think that a lot of people suspect that there's a lot more to the story, that there were some other influential people involved in trying to lean on Acosta, or that there were for example, there's evidence out there that had been covered up. I know that Mr. Epstein had computers removed from his mansion before the police were able to execute their search warrants. So all those computers, including videotapes, were never seen. They disappeared. So I think a lot of people believe that all this evidence and whatever led to this decision should be more transparent, and the public should be told about exactly how this deal was executed and negotiated.
And do some people believe that if this evidence were to reappear and we connect the dots, that it might lead to other powerful people?
Yes, there's been other powerful people whose names have come up on this. There were certainly other people around the country and possibly even around the world who were helping Epstein recruit girls and young women as part of his operation. I mean, it's been stated in court records. Girls have come forward and stated that they were recruited by people who work for Epstein.
Julie Brown from the Miami Herald.
So that alone right there tells you a lot exactly about the Jeffrey Epstein case if you didn't know about it. Simple fact of the matter is, this pretty much was the guy. This was pimp / predator, as we want to call it. But pretty much, he basically took girls, bred them, groomed them to basically be sexual toys. And the fact of this matter that this man is not in jail mystifies me. But there is a chance that because of everything that's coming out, that actually may change. As far as him, finally facing a jail time, because the simple fact of the matter is, the guy somehow got away scot clean in a non-prosecution case, which basically means that he just paid a fine and he wasn't facing any type of jail time. That is subject to change, however. At least we hope, because when you hear stories like that, that just tells you that guys with money, with access, with position, just seem to skate by. It feels like it doesn't change, but there needs to be a change as far as what we're looking at justice-wise. Because what is that actually saying? That a man, as long as he got enough money, can get out of anything? Then that tells you exactly where we are in this, and that's as scary as that is. It shouldn't happen. But then again, you would think for all the evidence against him, how in the world did he get out of this? Which, again, is a mystery, because, I can sit there and say that the person that was the prosecutor that was going against him is now the Secretary of Labor. And all I can think of is that maybe a deal, a quid pro quo got put into it. Hard to say, but it's not. But we're not beyond the realm of possibility on that. But moving right along. So I do have to point this out for all those parents that are on the fence about vaccinations. Do us all a favor. If you're going to, and here's my thing. I understand that parents have to protect their children. I do. But vaccinations have a history of being safe. I mean, the anti-vaxxers that are out there saying, I won't get my kid vaccinated because, vaccinations create autism. There is yet to be a record of that happens. They're injecting us with things that are rejected from our bodies. Again, there's no actual information to supersede that. And it's always amazing that the one person that started this, which I always have a gripe against, Jenny McCarthy, because so many people believe a celebrity over a scientist and a doctor, which still makes no sense to me. But the reason why I bring that up is basically because there was a bill in Iowa that was trying to get submitted called the Vaccination Safety and Right of Refusal Act. And I'm glad this bill got killed, because if this bill got passed, parents could turn around and actually get an exemption for vaccinations from children when they go into schools or child care centers. Because if you have a child and you ever put them in a daycare or had to enroll them in school, you had to get them something called, in short words, it was called a shot sheet, which means that you had to get a sheet from a physician that proved that, yes, they got their measles, mumps, chickenpox, and all other shots before they come into school, so that way they can be vaccinated. And this bill that was actually pushed forward, that thankfully was killed, they could have superseded that, saying that they have a philosophical exemption, which they would sit there and say, well, my child doesn't need to be vaccinated, but she needs to go to school. And people do not understand that the destruction behind these diseases, like currently right now, there's an outbreak of the measles only because some vaccinated children are being put in areas to where they can easily spread it. And people go, well, how come? And it never ceases to amaze about vaccinations. And honestly, if you don't know about vaccinations, now would be a perfect time to look into it, because there's decades upon decades of data that show that vaccinations are safe. Vaccinations don't cause autism. Vaccinations don't cause anything but preventing you from getting diseases that have wiped out populations a long time ago. For quite an example, measles. Do you understand how quickly measles can spread from one kid to another? Because one unvaccinated kid in the bunch is around a bunch of them. And I've had people go, well, if you put a vaccinated kid next to an unvaccinated kid, how does the vaccination kid still get sick? Then that tells me alone you do not understand how vaccinations work. the bottom line of it all is we have vaccinations in effect for a purpose, and we have it there to prevent kids from getting smallpox and everything else that kids back in the 1910s and 20s were getting. The bottom line, vaccinations work. There shouldn't be any bill on the docket. It's kind of interesting. This is the one time I'll sit there and say, for a parent standpoint, yeah, you can decide what your child should and should not have. This is true. But if you're going to put your child in public school or you're going to put them in a public daycare, then yes, you have to abide by the rules and get your child vaccinated. Otherwise, keep your kid at home. There's no point in getting everybody else sick. But then again, that's a whole nother subject. But thankfully, that did not get passed, which I'm glad about. But there's another thing which I just found interesting, where the organization known as Time's Up, well, her son was accused of sexual assault, so because of that, she is resigning, which I can understand that. It's the best thing to do, because, Time's Up campaigns against sexual assault, harassment, and things like that in the workplace as well as in life, and it would be kind of off-putting to see that if your son is accused of sexual assault, then you got to step down. Now, here's the problem I have with that. I'm always a big fan of due process. I'm a big fan of you are innocent until proven guilty. Court of public opinion will always be court of public opinion. This is true. But if your son is accused of sexual assault and if it's not beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'd sit there and say that she doesn't have to. I don't understand the whole quickly to resign thing. I've been accused. Ooh, let me step down. What if it's false? Again, it's like I don't understand the whole point of stepping down so early that, what if there's nothing there? What if it's the woman who accused his son, or the person who accused his son, what if they turn around and was like, what if they turned around and thought their claim was false? So you're telling me that you resigned for nothing? Now, I'm not saying that, as I'll be following that story, I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I am saying that in that sense, it just felt like it was too early, especially for the woman whose organization is responsible for getting a lot of these guys who would have got away with shit is now, coming to light. But again, that's why I say the whole thing about that is just that I just think it was too early in a jerk reaction to something that hadn't even been covered yet. But, it's depending on... I would say it's always up to the person, but in my opinion, it's too early to jump the ship on that. Pretty much. But another thing that I want to point out, for anybody that doesn't remember the Dutch historian Ruka Berman that went to the Davos conference and pretty much called every rich person out saying, you guys should be talking about taxes and how you should be paying more and helping the economy and things of that nature. And the fact that he made a lot of enemies, well, there's actually a Tucker Carlson interview. Yep, that Tucker Carlson, that's on Fox News. They basically had a segment to where he was interviewing him. It did not go well for Carson Tucker. Let me show you.
Oh, I'm against the globalist elite, blah, blah, blah. It's all very convincing, to be honest.
Why don't you go yourself, you tiny brain, and I hope this gets picked up. Because you're a moron. I tried to give you a hearing, but you were too
You can't handle the criticism, can you? We gotta be talking about Texas. That's it. Texas, Texas, Texas. All the rest is bullshit, in my opinion.
I mean, it feels like I'm at a firefight conference, and no one's allowed to speak about water. It's one of the great moments, maybe the great moment in Davos history. Clifford Bregman is the author of Utopia for Realists, and he joins us now. Mr. Bregman, I can't stop laughing just listening to that. Hey, Mark, that makes me wonder, are you the first person ever to note that people are flying private to talk about global warming, and that none of them mention tax avoidance? Has anyone ever said that before at Davos? Do you know?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on Davos history, but it is a bit hypocritical, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And others have noted that. We've noted it on this show. We've just never gone to Davos and said it out loud as you did. So if I was wearing a hat, I would take it off to you. What response did you get?
Well, I mean, they were not very happy with me. But I'm just I think, a random Dutch historian who's basically saying what everyone around the globe is thinking. You know, the vast majority of Americans, for years and years now, according to the polls, including Fox News viewers and including Republicans, are in favor of higher taxes on the rich. You know, higher inheritance taxes, higher top marginal tax rates, higher wealth taxes. It's all really mainstream. But no one's saying that at Davos, just as no one's saying it on Fox News, right? And I think the explanation for that is quite simple, is that most of the people in Davos, but also here on this channel, have been bought by the billionaire class. You know, you're not meant to say these things. So I just went there and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to say it, just as I'm saying it right here on this channel.
Well, what was interesting, I thought, about what you said was you noted something. I mean, many people have called for higher taxes, but very few.
Well, not on this channel, is it? I mean, almost all of the pundits on this channel for years have been against higher taxes, right? Even though the vast majority of Americans is in favor of it.
I mean, I don't know. It would be interesting to know how many hours of Fox you've watched, but I'm interested in what you said about tax avoidance. So just because someone faces a specific tax rate does not mean that person pays that tax rate at all. I don't think Netflix, for example, paid any taxes last year at all. So what would you do specifically to make certain that this class of people pays what they're supposed to pay?
Well, it's about multiple things. So we should really crack down on tax paradises and on tax avoidance. That's a major issue. But it's also about having higher taxes. So in the 1950s, for example, in the 1960s, in the golden age of capitalism, as historians call it, we had top marginal tax rate for the very rich of about 70, 80, 90%. Actually, under Eisenhower, the Republican president, and this was also, one of the best periods in American history. Same is true for the UK and the rest of Europe. So, as a historian, for me, it's all not, it's really not rocket science. We should just go back to simple and straightforward solutions from the past.
Right, but this country was sustained, and since you're a historian, I guess you would know this, sustained by an industrial economy at the time that was broad and deep. They created a middle class. That doesn't exist anymore. So it's an entirely different economy. I wish it did exist.
Oh well, but that's not really an issue. I mean,
work the same way with an entirely different economy?
Well, I think it would. I mean, America is still pretty much the most powerful country in the world, right? So if it really would want to, it could easily crack down on tax paradises. But the thing is, I mean, you guys have brought into power a president that doesn't even want to show its own tax returns. I mean, who knows how many billions he has hidden in the Cayman Islands or in Bermuda. So I think the issue really is one of corruption and of people being bribed and of not being, not talking about the real issues. What the family, what the Murdochs basically want you to do is to scapegoat immigrants instead of talking about tax avoidance. So I'm glad you're now finally raising the issue, but that's what's been happening for the past couple of years.
And I'm taking orders from the Murdochs. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, it doesn't work that directly. But I mean, you've been part of the Cato Institute, right? You've been a senior fellow there for years. You've been taking their dirty money. They're funded by cock billionaires,
Wait, why don't you tell me how it does work?
Well, it works by you taking their dirty money. It's as easy as that. I mean, you are a millionaire funded by billionaires. That's what you are. And I'm glad you now finally jumped the bandwagon, of people like Bernie Sanders and AOC. But you're not part of the solution, Mr. Carlson. You're part of the problem, actually.
AOC, but can I just say,
it's true, right? It's true, right? That all the anchors on Fox, they're all millionaires. How is this possible? Well, it's very easy. You're just not talking about certain things.
Fox doesn't even play where you are.
It doesn't play where you are? Well, have you heard of the internet? I can watch things whatever I want, I have, actually. I can't say I'm a great fan of your show, but I do my homework when you invite me on your show. So, I mean, you're probably not going to air this, but I went to Davos to speak truth to power. and I'm doing exactly the same thing right now. You may not like it, but you're a millionaire funded by billionaires, and that's the reason why you're not talking about these issues.
But I am talking about these issues.
Yeah, only now. Come on, you jumped the bandwagon. You're all like, oh, I'm against the globalist elite, blah, blah, blah. It's not very convincing, to be honest.
Why don't you go yourself, you tiny brain, and I hope this gets picked up. Because you're a moron. I tried to give you a hearing, but you were too annoying for me.
You can't handle the criticism, can you?
There's a war on alternative media. There's a war where they're trying to criminalize political expression. There's a war where they're trying to criminalize free speech.
And that was beautiful. And I'll be honest with you guys, that alone, I mean, I don't like Tucker Carlson anyway, because to me, he's just younger Sean Hannity anyway. But I love the fact of the matter is how he literally sat there and showed Tucker Carlson for what he was. He asked the question. I mean, he literally sat there and said, how come all of Fox's people are millionaires? He says, how's that possible? He goes, you take your orders from the Murdochs, but you don't take it directly? No. And again, which part of that was wrong? I mean, Fox News was bought by Rupert Murdoch and was turned into this highly, extremely conservative channel. So he's not far off from the truth, any more far off that he was talking about taxes. So the fact of the matter is that, yes, that the rich need to be held accountable. The only thing that, the thing that what spurned Tucker Carlson the most is that he didn't come out the way that he thought he would. Like he always tried to do, like Bill O'Reilly always tried to do. Bill O'Reilly always tried to, to bully and step over people and try to show that, oh, I have the right idea and you don't. And this guy, Mr. Bergman, was not going. I love the fact that he sat there, an actual historian was sitting there saying, yes, I can say it beyond a shadow of a doubt that we were prosperous when the rich were heavily taxed. Can you say the same right now? And it's funny where Tucker Carlson had no response except to call him a fucking moron. Classy. But he even dared him to say, I bet you won't even put this interview out there. And lo and behold, Tucker Carlson never did. But I'm kind of glad that man didn't record it for the rest of us to see. I thought that was pretty cool to actually play that. But again, it's Fox News, so we really should be expecting anything more from those individuals, except for what they've been told to say. So moving right along, as far as that goes, the one other story I'm going to get before we get to our good news segment is it's a weird one. It's a weird one because it's a tale as old as time, but for some odd reason, this kid thought they can get away with it.
How does being a patriot and trying to show pride in your country, how is that inappropriate?
Clovis North senior Maddie Mueller doesn't shy away from sharing her political views or wardrobe. She's a member of the Valley Patriots. The group asked their members to wear their MAGA hats on February 20th. Maddie was told she couldn't on campus, so she asked if she could wear any Trump hat with school colors on it, and she was told no, citing the dress code.
To my knowledge, Trump is not a logo. It's a last name. It's just our president. You can't really claim that our president is a logo, a sports team. It's not affiliating with any gang.
The Clovis Unified School District dress code does not specify if political hats or shirts are allowed.
Bottom line for us, our dress code is really about allowing our kids to come to school, to feel safe at school, to feel supported at school, and to be free of distractions so they can focus on learning.
Here we are closer to the shouting fire in a crowded theater.
Former federal district judge Oliver Wanger says the student's First Amendment right is being stripped, but the district may have the right to do so.
A hat is something that could invoke violence or invoke controversy, then for the safety of the students, the school is within its legal right.
Maddie says she's been dress coded repeatedly for wearing t-shirts that say "Build the Wall."
I'm not really caring if I'm offending anybody. I'm just showing support for the president and what I believe.
Maddie's parents support her mission, but she says her mom believes the consequences could be severe.
They might hold me from graduating if I continue to be vocal and do things like this.
Yep. So again, look, there's nothing wrong with individuality. And I understand there's going to be a lot of people that think that Donald Trump is great. Can't do anything about them. But you're a child at a school, so it means you have to adhere to dress code. Which means that just because you put on a MAGA hat and just because you put on a Trump shirt doesn't absolve you. That's the reason why schools have dress codes. It's the reason why, most kids were not allowed to wear President Obama t-shirts in school. Because there were stories about that. They were not allowed to wear anything presidential because they were feared that would start violence. In the same sense where a white girl in a MAGA hat goes down a corridor, you also might cause violence. The thing about it is, it's a dress code. Being a Trump supporter does not absolve you of that, which is scary. Because this honestly is the Trump effect. This honestly is where you see his actions and what he does and the lack of care that he has behind it is now starting to show other people like, hey, if he can do it, so can I. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, I don't know why. Again, I've always said that and said I don't know why women vote for Trump. He is literally against you. He hasn't really put in anything as far as certain measures to protect you, but yet women still vote for him, which amazes me so. But then again, I shouldn't be surprised. Most women still follow Ted Bundy, and Ted Bundy had a passion for eating people. But again, it doesn't make any sense that, yes, it is a dress code. You are mad about dress code. Easily put. Why don't you wait till you graduate? You can wear your MAGA hat and your Trump supporter shirt all throughout college if you want to. College doesn't have any dress codes as long as you cover yourself up. But as long as you're in high school, yeah, you got to pay attention to it. Sorry, that's the way it is. But getting to the end of that, we actually get into our good news segment. Now, for our good news segment, like I said, in the world of doom and gloom, and we always talk about the things that are always negative, we always try to leave you with a story or two that, good, kind of leaves us with good vibes. And especially on the weekend, you always want good vibes. So I came across this one where a 79-year-old woman is literally called the queen of the blues guitar. And here is why. realistically, I only wish I could play like that. She's 79 years old and literally an icon in the blues scene, and she is still shredding. I wish I could do what she. Now I'll take that back. I know one day I always say I'll pick up a guitar and actually learn to do that. But the simple fact of the matter is that woman is 79 years old and is still playing like she's 21. So you're only as old as you feel. But that's going to actually wrap it up for this podcast. Thank you all guys for all watching. This is some shameless plugging here. I'm not the only guy that usually has podcasts. Actually, my other buddies, Vaughn Weatherspoon, they said on Facebook, has several podcasts of his own. He has Gotta Get That Reference VST, which is a 30-minute podcast about news and views and movies and things of that nature, and other things that you might find interesting. He also has Rhythmness, where you can reminisce over the rhythm, where he basically goes over music albums to a 4-tier system, pretty much just grading it as giving his musical opinion about it. He also has Random Swap with Uncle VZ, which is an early morning podcast, where basically he goes over the pool of ratchetness and crazy, dip your pinky toe in it, have a little fun, because it's all entertainment. All three of his shows are interactive and definitely can be found under his Facebook group, I Get That Reference, and also under his Facebook page, They Said One Weatherspoon. My other buddy, Trace Brown, DJ King Eddie Wayne, also has podcasts of his own. He actually has The Bump Down, which is a musical podcast, which he goes over what's hot on the charts and what's hot on the underground and mainstream, and pretty much talks about up-and-coming artists. And at the same time, if you're an artist that just wants to learn more about the musical industry, or you're just curious yourself as just a regular person, you can definitely learn a lot from this man's expertise. He also has another show called The Bump Down. Aside from The Bump Down. Wow, too early. So aside from The Bump Down, he actually has another show called The Smoke with Truth. Now, The Smoke with Truth is an unbiased, in-your-face, check your ego at the door type of podcast, because it will go to those areas that will offend some people, but honestly, it's all about saying the truth and speaking truth to power. So again, both of those shows, just like my friend Vaughn's, are also interactive, and definitely can be found under Trace Brown or DJ Key Wayne. And also, if you go to Trace Brown at Facebook, you can also submit music to be played on the Bump Down by the email that's actually there. My other buddy Thomas Reed on Facebook, actually has To Be Determined podcast, which will actually be every Saturday at 3 p.m., so we're not too far off from that. What is To Be Determined podcast? Well, it's a fitness podcast to where he goes over certain workouts, certain eating habits, techniques that he himself has tried, and things that could be beneficial to others. Keep in mind, if I can show you the before picture of what this man looked like versus what he looks like now, it would be night and day. But again, To Be Determined podcast, where the results depend upon you, will definitely be at 3 p.m. later today on Saturday. Later today, since that's already Saturday. And of course, with my show, which How the Frack We Got Here, which always comes on at 10 o'clock to noon. And of course, I'll be having my Off Limits podcast, which I think is Off Limits, later today from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. to where we're going to go to places where nobody dare to tread. And it's always going to be, I always there and say, if you're not offending one person, then you're not speaking the truth enough. But again, all of our shows can be found in the Facebook group, I Get That Reference. It is a group for all. We simply just ask you the only rule that we have is to participate. So as long as you're liking, you're sharing, you're subscribing, and as long as being social, then that's all we ask, because you're on Facebook for a reason, not to be a creeper. And aside from that, we do all have YouTube pages of our videos. So if you look up To Be Determined, if you look up I Get That Reference, if you look up The Bump Down, if you look up How the Frack We Got Here, if you look up Off Limits podcast, all of those are YouTube pages with active videos to where you'll be able to like, share, and subscribe every video we've done so far. So at the end of How the Frack We Got Here, I always stand and say the message is about staying informed. Staying informed means not taking everything you see at face value, actually doing the research to find the truth for yourself, and sharing that with others. And hopefully that process moves on to another person, because an informed community can make a lot more better decisions than an uninformed one, because an uninformed one got us Trump. So, with that being said, guys, this will be it for the How the Frack We Got Here podcast for today. Thank you all guys for watching on the playback. Feel free to go ahead and still respond to me as if I'm still here, which is fine, because I know all you Trump supporters love to do that 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning when the tinfoil hats come off, but that's all right. I appreciate y'all too. But aside from that, guys, it's been fun. It's been real. Have a good weekend. Whether you're in the north, stay warm. If you're in the south, stay dry, because Mother Nature is rewriting a lot of rules. Peace.